We are ending some pretty major effing cycles over here up in this bitch, man. Like, damn. What is that, my fellow weirdos out there, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Tani Michelle, and basically, I'm just another spiritual ass bitch here on the internet. Just so you know, if you are new here, we are not all love, light, twin flames, and unicorns over here. And let's get into this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, also known as the Great Conjunction video. I have been taking so many effing notes on this video for like so long now. There's more, don't worry. I've just been taking so many notes because I've been getting so many different downloads on this great conjunction and the possibilities of what it could bring, the themes that it could bring in all of our lives. I'm also going to go over what this means for each sign. Before we get started, I do just want to say this may be a controversial video because I am going to bring up certain things that this conjunction could bring for us as a collective, as humanity. If that triggers you, then I don't know, I guess you're triggered then. Also, this is just gonna be a chill video, okay? Literally, I have so many notes that I'm gonna try to get through all of them, and I'm gonna try to make it all make sense and not be all over the place and scattered. So sit back, relax, grab you a drink, a crystal, whatever you need. Just chill with me. I just wanna go over what I think is really interesting because this is some interesting shit and some really big shit, okay? Like, we're ending like a 2 centuries freaking cycle here, a freaking 200+ year cycle here and entering into a new one. We're also ending a 20-year cycle here and entering to a new one. We are entering into an era, an age of air, and I don't mean the age of Aquarius, although that is kind of debatable and controversial, but personally for me, I kind of like see both sides as a Libra, but we're not gonna get into that. So anyway, so I'm not necessarily talking about the age of Aquarius, but I am saying that this is a new age of air that we are entering into, but it's not the same thing as a lot of people talk about with the age of Aquarius. This is literally the last, in my opinion, biggest wave of 2020 as well, and it really leads us into the next several decades and centuries, and so this is why this is such a big deal. I also would love to know your thoughts down below while you're listening to this. Like I said, this is a chill video. I want it to feel like I'm just talking to you guys about the stuff that I've uncovered, the stuff that I've found, so feel free to comment down below and let me know what you think. If you pull anything together from this as well, I would really love to know that and hear your opinion on it. So yeah, we are ending the era of Earth. So the last 200 years have marked this pattern of Jupiter and Saturn, two of the biggest planets in the sky, where they meet in the sky every 20 years. They have been meeting in Earth signs, Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo, for the last 200+ years. Other than 1980, they met in Libra. So sometimes they kind of switch to the element that they're about to move into before they actually start meeting in that element from then on. So they did meet in Libra in the early 1980s, and then they met in Taurus. The last time they met was in Taurus in 2000. So the last 20 years has been very Taurian, which really goes with the rest of the last 200 years of this era of Earth. So before we go any farther, just in case you're new to astrology, and I'm going to try to include timestamps down below so you can skip around if you want to hear different things that you're interested in if you already know some about astrology and you don't want to hear my explanation. Basically, Jupiter, plain and simple explanation here. I like to keep it pretty basic so I know people are new. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, growth, progress, fortune, learning and growing, the guru, also wisdom and experience, fairness. Jupiter rules Sagittarius and it rules the sign of Pisces in traditional Western astrology. Saturn is the opposite of Jupiter, whereas Jupiter is expansion and growth and magnifying things, making things bigger and growing things and progressing things. Saturn is more of restriction, limits, edges and boundaries and hard work, structure, and all of these types of Saturnian types of things. Saturn is what tells us no and what our limits are, what our boundaries are, where we meet the wall. Jupiter is where we walk through doors and there's opportunities, you know? They both can have their positive impacts and negative impacts, which all depends on your perspective and perception anyway. Like, you could get a promotion with Saturn and you could have something like mold growing in your house because of Jupiter. So it really just depends on what they're aspecting and your perspective of the situation anyway. It's not all like Jupiter's the good guy and Saturn's the bad guy, although Jupiter is considered the most benefic planet and Saturn is more of the malefic planet. So, but it really does depend on perspective. So Jupiter and Saturn have not exactly came into an exact conjunction, but they have both been in Capricorn for the whole year, which has been the reason that 2019 has been such a shit year. And astrologers have been predicting this for decades, years, because Pluto is also in Capricorn with them as well. And these three major planets really define our societal systems, our economy, our structures, our big booming businesses and corporations, so our government and the people in power. And so this is why we've seen a lot of those things be so at the forefront and be so affected, amongst other things, right? So Jupiter and Saturn haven't exactly been conjunct yet, but they are about to come conjunct exactly for the first time on the winter solstice of December 21st, when they move to 0 degrees Aquarius together. They're both like Saturn's going to step in and then Jupiter's going to step in, I believe, and they're going to conjunct in the sign of Aquarius. I will kind of put something up on the screen so you can see what that looks like, so you can kind of see it. Yeah, so you can have like a visual representation. So Saturn hasn't been in Aquarius since 1991 to 1993. So if you were born in that time frame, then you're likely going to be going through a Saturn return. Also, if you were born in the time of 1962 to 1964, then you're also likely about to go through a Saturn return because you have Saturn in Aquarius. Now, this great conjunction actually happens to be conjunct right on top of my Saturn in Aquarius, so it's going to be one hell of a Saturn return for me. But anyways, so with Saturn and Jupiter moving into the sign of Aquarius and conjunct together, they're technically basically conjunct in Capricorn, but they don't actually go to their full conjunction until Aquarius. So we've already been feeling this energy. This is already setting the stage for brand new energy where we are moving from this shift to Capricornian energy to Aquarian energy. And I'm going to explain what the fuck that means here in a minute, so don't worry. When Saturn and Jupiter get together in any sign, this really points to major changes and a major new era coming when it comes to our systems, the rulership in the world, growth, progression, economic structures and social structures, how we progress in the world as a society. So it can really mark the beginning of like a brand new era in the whole entire world and in the human species. It's almost like a whole new world order is starting to form at this time. For that to happen, the old one has to fall apart, which is what we're kind of in the middle of right now with everything going on in 2020. So, other than the 1980s, because Saturn and Jupiter have been meeting in Earth signs for the last 200 plus years, we've seen a very physical and material world. Everything has been about the physical and the material, in case you haven't noticed. It is all about how much money you have. It is all about what you wear, what you look like, what you own. What you own is who you are to people in our society today. What kind of job you have, what kind of money you make, dictates what kind of person you are because of this major Earth era that we've been in for the last 200 plus years. But if you notice, when Saturn and Jupiter met in Libra for the first time in 1980, in the early 1980s, we saw major changes when it came to relationships. All of a sudden, things were becoming more acceptable for women or people in marriages to get a divorce, because before then it was like a big no-no. It would ruin your reputation. It wasn't good. Like, you just didn't get a divorce. It was not acceptable or looked up upon to get a divorce. You were just expected to stay in a marriage that you were unhappy in. But in the early 1980s, people started being able to get divorces and to look at relationships in a different way. Music started to change. Music started becoming more and more of a big deal, which is very Libran. A lot of things started to change in gender roles around the early 80s as well, which is also very Libran. Now, when just Saturn moved into the sign of Aquarius in the early 1990s without Jupiter, that was when the birth of the internet started happening. That was when the internet started really taking off. And Aquarius is the sign of more higher intelligence, higher thinking, higher technology, science, all of these different things. So that's why we started seeing a big boom in the internet. Aquarius is also the sign of the people. So the internet was able to connect people from all over the world in different countries and different places to each other, rather than having to meet face to face or call on the phone, etc., etc. So moving back to the sign of Capricorn, where they've been at but haven't been exactly conjunct, is about those at the top and those in power, those that hold the power over the masses. Now, this isn't just like any Capricorn, this is just Capricorn energy in the form of a collective. So it's basically those at the top of the hierarchy or the patriarchy that hold the power, the big businesses, structures, corporations, organizations, structures in power that have power over the people. And that's why it's no coincidence that the last 200 plus years have been such a materialistic time, full of those with money being in power. The Earth era has been about using the Earth to rule, using the Earth to get what we want, using the physical world to get what we want and to jump to the top. Whether that's money, homes, property, our status in the world, which comes normally from the material things that we possess, right? Consumerism, building material foundational structures in order to rule with power over the masses. It's also been about land and over the last 200 plus years, and wars over who has what land, resources, industrial resources. Basically, it just comes down to our relationship with the earth. But it's almost like the ugly side of that, where instead of understanding the earth, it's like we just want to control the earth. But Aquarius, with Jupiter and Saturn coming into the Great Conjunction in Aquarius, this is the flip side of that coin. Aquarius in traditional astrology is actually also ruled by Saturn, just like Capricorn, but Saturn expresses itself in Aquarius in a different way. And the easiest way to think about this is Capricorn is about the hierarchy. It's about getting to the top, the status at the top and the people at the top of the pyramid that rule over everybody else. Leo, the opposite of Aquarius, is also very much like that because it's the king. Aquarius is the opposite of Leo and also the flip side to Capricorn. Aquarius is about the foundational structure still, but mentally and psychologically with the people. So instead of the people at the top of the pyramid having the power, it's the people at the bottom, the actual normal everyday person, and the crowds or groups of people that are just normal people, the people that are being ruled over in some way. Saturn in Aquarius, it's going to be more about those normal everyday people wanting the power and wanting to have independence and freedom rather than be controlled by those at the top. So it's more about the progression, growth, and power of the masses rather than the limited people that are at the top of the pyramid or in the leadership position. So basically society at large. So what the fuck does this mean basically, right? So we're going to start seeing a shift from the powerhouse of the government officials or the structures that are in charge in some way, shape, or form, for those ruling over the many to affect change. It's going to be more so about the people or the masses, the ordinary person, affecting change. You remember, guys, these are just predictions. These are just kind of possibilities that could happen, things that we could definitely see with this great conjunction and this start of the new era happening over the next 200 years. So just keep that in mind. I just want to say that really quick. I think this is why we've seen such a disaster in 2020 of a lot of the people in power beginning to fall. But first, before we start seeing the masses or the ordinary person, the society at large beginning to take their freedom back or beginning to express their freedom, their rebellion, their individuality, we could start seeing first more restriction, because that is also what Saturn does, even though Jupiter is there with it. But Jupiter just stepped out of Capricorn. Although it is a little bit better in Aquarius than it is in Capricorn, it's still with Saturn. So this could either be Jupiter blowing up Saturn's restriction and boundaries and limits and making it like on a large scale like it did with Pluto, and the virus, blowing it up and making it on a large scale. Or it could somehow make it fair or make it justified. And because Saturn and Jupiter were just in Capricorn with corrupt Pluto, this tells me that, in my opinion, I think we're going to see still people in power or the big powerhouse structures, the people at the top of the pyramid, the leaders, trying to take control by leading people in this masses and society to think that they have freedom, that they're on their side, that they're doing things for them. And I think this could be a very big possibility. This is something that's really been bothering me and coming to me. So I'm just saying it. It could be a possibility. This is not to fearmonger. This is just to say these are possibilities that we could see with this. But before we start seeing the masses really wake up and come into their freedom, which I think is going to more so happen when Saturn moves into Pisces and Pluto moves into Aquarius later on in this decade, I think first we may start seeing more restriction, boundaries, limits, on the people first, which is going to lead to some kind of rebellion, to some kind of resistance with the people. You may start really seeing people cracking down on freedoms, rights, freedom of speech, even as we are already seeing censoring. All of these things are going to get bigger. Best believe it. I really do believe that. As we saw when Saturn dipped into Aquarius just earlier in 2020, right around that time, censorship started getting crazy. Social distancing started. We started going on lockdowns. People weren't allowed to connect. They only had to use the internet to connect, which is very Aquarian. Aquarius is about connecting with tons of other people, but in a weird or different way. It's connected, but also disconnected at the same time. And I'm going to actually link an amazing video by an astrologer that I really look up to, Adam. He did change his name, but I forget. I can't say his new name. So I'm going to link a video by him. He did a whole series on this. And I did watch one of the videos, which was about the myth of Aquarius. And very interesting. I actually never had heard the myth of Aquarius before. I had tried to look it up years ago when I first started my astrology journey, and I was actually having trouble back then finding the myth of Aquarius. So I'm going to link his video down below because he does an excellent, excellent job at explaining Aquarian energy. And I don't want to you get it. Anyways, my moon's in Aquarius, my Saturn's in Aquarius, but I'm a weirdo. So yeah, censorship will be a bigger issue, I think. But in the long run, I think it'll be the catalyst for more freedom in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes we have to get pushed to our limits to finally break free of some kind of vicious circle where we feel trapped, right? And so I think that could be a very big possibility here. Limits can push us to do something that will possibly finally create some kind of change and more freedom. And I think with this Capricorn energy, like I've been saying all year, we're getting stripped down to the bare bones of things. We're getting stripped down to literally the frame of the house, and everything else is gone. It's just the frame of the house. And I think especially for those that live in the US, and I am going to talk a little bit more about the US here soon, so stay tuned for that. But if you live in the US, and I'm just saying this because I live in the US, if you live in the US, I think we're now seeing where we're almost getting stripped down to the bones of the United States of America, which is very much about the Constitution, the amendments, the constitutional rights, the rights as people that we have. Do they even stand? Are they still even accurate? Freedom of speech, yet we're getting censored. You know what I mean? These things I think are going to get a lot bigger than they are now. So yeah, freedom of speech, human rights, factual evidence, and scientific evidence will be at its peak. Aquarius is a very experimental and scientific sign as well, so we're going to see a lot of that. I mean, literally, we've only barely touched the surface of internet and technology, so we're going to see major progressions and shifts from here on out, now that Saturn and Jupiter will be in Aquarius. I mean, over the next year alone, there's going to be a major boom in scientific evidence. I'm not saying it's going to be aliens or disclosure or anything like that, but that is a possibility, and that's why I'm wearing my cool Aquarius alien shirt. I kind of like to call it, but that is a very real possibility. Yeah, scientific evidence and scientific studies will be at its peak. It will be thriving, and it could even be to a detriment. It could be to where science kind of becomes the powerhouse, you know what I mean? Science kind of becomes the top of the pyramid all of a sudden. This conjunction is going to be squaring Uranus off and on all year, at least Saturn will be, and we're going to get into that in a little bit, but that's definitely going to cause some issues, especially with this vaccine, and I don't feel right about it, but we're going to get into that. So social media has proved to be a way that we can kind of connect with others all around the world, but at the same time has also caused such a huge divide, I think, in us as a human species, as humanity, in the human race. And that can also be very Saturnian, very Saturn in Aquarius. And with Jupiter there, this could even expand or magnify it, or it may find a way to resolve it. People may start coming together, especially with the North Node in Gemini. Things are going to get very more intellectual because it is air. I should have mentioned this a long time ago, but the energy is going to get a little bit lighter and more intellectual. It's going to be more about learning. It's going to be more about proof, facts, evidence. It's going to be more about your mind. We're going to make major new discoveries on the mind, which is literally the most mysterious thing, I think, in the world at this point. We still don't have a lot of information or evidence on the human mind and how it works. And I think that's going to end up being a really big thing over the next few decades. But it's going to be very much about communication, socializing, talking the mind, possibly, education and therapy and working with the human mind, all of these types of things. Now, it could lead to artificial intelligence. You know what I mean? That is a possibility. I don't know though, so we'll see. So I'm trying not to get too conspiracy theory here, but some of this stuff is possibilities, you guys, so I do have to say it, okay? So I'm just saying. So yeah, but there is a very big divide in the human species. Human to human connection is not what it was. People don't say hi to each other. I've literally seen so many videos this year alone where someone's getting literally attacked on the street, and the first instinct to the people that are walking by or that happen to see it is to get out their phones and record, not to call 911, not to try to help the person getting attacked, not to try to do anything. It's just, let me record this to see how much views I can get, because that's status, right? And that is exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the earth era, the material era, all about the hierarchy and where I fit in on this big thing, this big imaginary thing of people that are in power, right? And so that, I think, is going to either come to an end or it's going to get worse. So one of the two. But with that Capricorn energy and the earth energy, it's been all about achievement, right? Achievement, materialistic achievement, physical achievement, goals. And that's why the spiritual community is all about, how can I manifest money? How can I manifest my twin flame? Blah, 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 blah. And that's all about material achievement. And I'm not saying that money is a bad thing. Money is just a thing. It's humans that can turn it into something completely else, right? It's like a knife. You can use a knife to cut your food, or you can use a knife to stab someone, right? I understand we have needs, we need money, but with this Aquarian and air energy, I think we're going to start focusing. There is going to be a huge movement towards focusing and learning how to interact with our environment and our world, rather than controlling it and dominating it and using it constantly for material gain and profit, and to basically just dominate it. Like I said, I always try to reach for other words and then I just start stumbling and I'm like, I should have just stopped there, but you get what I'm saying. But yeah, there's going to be a major expanse in technology. Age of technology is definitely coming, along with what it can do, whether that's, for good or bad, depending on your perspective. Major new inventions that can expand and progress our connection and relation with others around the world. Reaching more people from different walks of life is definitely going to be a huge thing. So yeah, there could either be more of a divide with our society, with Aquarius almost kind of being the outcast and living on the outskirts outside of the normal boundaries, the norm, the status quo, or we could come together. The higher traits of Aquarius is really realizing that we are all one people, right? That separation is an illusion, which we really do start realizing that when we get to Pisces. And this may be more and more apparent. Another thing is really interesting with this is I do feel like there could possibly be more division within our world, and especially here in the US. I feel like two major sides could start forming. One that believes in some kind of new structure that's forming, and one that believes in the old one, or one that's completely the outcast, the outsider. Because of this Aquarian energy and the North Node in Gemini until 2022, the node in Gemini has two sides to it, right? It deals with the community, with the people in our environment. With the Aquarian energy, this is adding more of an outcast, more of an archetype of people that are outcasts, that are basically out of the status quo, that are abnormal, etc., etc. If there are new trends or new leaders that come in, these types of people are going to be people that are very, very different from the usual. They are going to be outcasts. They're going to relate to the normal everyday person. They are going to relate to the minority or even the majority of the masses of society. They're not going to relate to the hierarchy, the people at the top. It's likely no longer going to be this like power hungry energy that drives everyone for money and status and material things and gain and power and achievements, but how we can almost like reach people and how we can kind of like help humanity or our world or our environment instead. So it's going to be more about how we can progress on an intellectual level and relate on an intellectual level, how we can communicate on an intellectual level instead of progressing on a physical and material level. I know I kind of keep saying that, but I'm just kind of going off my notes here, making sure I don't miss anything. So another thing we could really start seeing in the world is more of an independence forming eventually. Like I said, this may not come for a little while. You know, like some of these predictions may take years, decades, centuries to come. Some things you may start seeing right away, some things maybe not. There may be some kind of oppression first, right? There may be more of an oppression of freedom and rights before we start seeing almost like a opposition to this from the people, where we start seeing more people wanting and standing up for independence. So just keep that in mind. But eventually we will, I think, see more of an independence with independent business owners, independent creators, independent businesses, independent publishers, things like this, rather than big corporate organizations and companies. We're going to see major changes in music and the things that are trendy or the people that people look up to. It's going to be less about what they have and, you know, what kind of status they have and what materially they have. It's going to be more about the outcasts, people that relate, right? More the people you connect with. Rock, techno music, or some kind of progressed new way of doing music may come out that's like kind of weird and different, but also very relatable in some way. That may be more about rebellion or being an outsider, or that's more out of the norm. Like out of the norm is going to be trendy to some extent. That's what's going to be the new normal. It's going to be being out of the norm, being an outcast, being an outsider is going to be more trendy rather than following the status quo or following some kind of material status thing. But we still may see major themes in people following the crowd. You know what I mean? There may be like this whole group think thing going on where it's like masses of people all think the same way, which is why we could also see, especially with the South Node in Sagittarius, a rise in cults or corrupted gurus or cult leaders or religions. You know, things like this could definitely come to a rise around this time. Yeah, it's basically a time of the outcast with this major era of Aquarius starting for the next 20 years. It's going to be an air sign era for the next 200 plus years, but it's going to be an Aquarius era for the next 20 years. So as Saturn and Jupiter conjunct in Aquarius. So, and since it's at 0 degrees Aquarius, it really is like the make of a new era, a new world order, a new world. It's like, you know, still going to represent the falling away of that Capricornian world and the birth of a new Aquarian world, because they're already so close together and technically conjunct, just not all the way to the degree conjunct yet until they get into Aquarius. But because they're right on that cusp and they're moving over into Aquarius basically together a few days apart, it's still, I think, going to be a major shift. There's still going to, I think, be people in the Capricorn side that want it one way and people on the Aquarian side that want it the new way, that want a new system in place. So it's going to be very much about those on the other side of rules, structures, and boundaries. Jupiter, I think, like I was saying, could be a little bit corrupt because it's been in Capricorn with Pluto and Saturn. And this, I think, will keep being shown from time to time. You know, we may see corrupt authority playing it off like they are out for the people or with the people, or like they, you know, want independence for the people, but really they're still somehow in charge, or they're still working behind the scenes at something. We're going to see progressing in the social structure to serve the masses instead of those at the top. Aquarius really helps us think for ourselves, but also the downside of that is, once again, it can follow others and what they think instead of thinking for themselves. With this Gemini North Node, it is really very much about thinking of yourself for yourself, but at the same time, the downside of that can be just following trends or hopping on a bandwagon. You do have to watch out for that and be careful of that. So yeah, the more kind of enlightened side, I guess you could say, of Aquarius is about becoming more independent, focusing on freedom of your own individuality and being yourself. So you may kind of see the lower vibration of Aquarius and the higher vibration of Aquarius as we kind of work towards this radical change and evolution for humanity and the social progress that we're going to be making. We may see new types of popularity or trends rise, like I was saying, as the underlying shift is more focused on something different, unique, and relatable, and even humble at times instead of materialistic. It's going to be very much about progressive thinking and less about reacting out of survival and material needs and fear out of material needs. You know, we've grown to think that we need certain material things in our life to be liked, loved, or successful, and that's a belief I think that's going to be really falling apart over these next several years. So let's talk about the Uranus and Taurus square. So I'm going to put a picture up so you can see what it looks like. But Saturn and Jupiter, but mainly Saturn most of the time, is going to be in a tough aspect, which we call a square in astrology, to Uranus in the sign of Taurus for a long time, mainly throughout the year of 2021. These are some of the things that we can see happening because Uranus is about revolutions, it's about liberation, it's about freedom, it's about independence. It's very kind of similar to Aquarius because it is the modern ruler of Aquarius. Uranus is rebellious, it's a free thinker, it's innovative, it's also very shocking and surprising and has dramatic twists and turns. It's a very random planet as well. It's a very weird and different planet, but it's in the sign of Taurus, and Taurus is all about our values, our morals, our possessions, that earthy energy, once again, materialism. So our food and, you know, where we grow our food and stuff like that. And so this is why we've seen such an eccentricity and kind of living off the grid and, you know, growing your own food and, you know, working for yourself. And we've seen people like really like moving out of society and off the grid, which is another very Aquarian thing. So we're going to continue to see more of that as time goes on, I think. But basically, I think what we're going to see here is revolutionizing and a breaking free of fixed structures and foundations when it comes to the material world and the earth era. So land, money, resources, industries, possible overthrow of some of these things, or, you know, an evolution of some of these things, a progression of some of these things, possible disputes related to rights, ownership, monetary value, property value, and resources and trade. Also, you know, land. We may see more interest in our earth and our environment, but this may conflict with the social structures that have been built in the past at first. We may see new game-changing and innovative technology or systems that may surface pertaining to the way that we use or gather our resources. There could also be many issues, challenges, and conflicts with how we progress or how we are progressing or not progressing with our resources, economics, food, land, money, oil, etc. Also financial issues, major shifts that may result in changing money in value, changes in allies with other countries as well. What may look cool and trendy or like freedom may not be, and may actually be another form of control or another system set in place to control people. So keep that in mind as well. You may see major economic changes in jobs and services. So in the next few years alone, I think that we will have major upgrades in our financial systems and economy, the material things that we give value to, and also we may see fighting over freedom and rights as well. I also think that from what I see with the astrology and these vaccines coming out, I think there could be major backlash with the vaccines. I think that we are moving into a time where it's going to be either going to be people trying to control the masses or the masses trying to control the people in power. One of the two. It's going to really get into a really divided time where I think there could be major backlash on science or the use of scientific medicines or the use of modern medicine. I think this could really have something to do with this, because once things start progressing into Pisces, we are going to have a lot, and I mean a lot, of very similar things going on as we did to the mid-60s when we started seeing the psychedelic era and the use of psychedelics and earth medicine, but also modern medicine at that time, be used. And so once things move into Pisces, I think we may see similar themes coming up from the 60s and the 70s and the major kind of peace, love, hippie type of, hippie type of stuff coming up, which I think is going to be really interesting. I'm actually excited to see that. But I do think that there could be something that happens with this vaccine that does not go so well, depending on from what I see on the astrology. So I'm just going to say that, but we'll see how it goes. I could be totally wrong. These are just possibilities, predictions. So just wanted to say that. Plus, in the next couple years, we're going to see the nodal shift from Gemini and Taurus. So, you know, we're going to see division within community to money and economy in the US, and we will see big changes in themes and how our environment affects our health, because Aquarius is the 3rd house for the US specifically, and Taurus is the 6th for the US. So, which once again tells me specifically for the US, we are going to see major changes in jobs, something to do with pollution or machines and air, and how the air is affecting our health in some way. We're also going to see maybe jobs may progress more towards technology than ever before. Jobs, businesses, and communities will be pushed to progress in different innovative ways. Something with public services and organizations, this could either be more restriction or more freedom. Either one could go either way. So I want to really dive into the US chart here for a minute. Like I said, if you're not interested in the US, then I'll have timestamps below. But so the Aqua South Node, the Aquarius South Node in the US chart, the South Node for the US is in Aquarius, which I find very interesting. And this great conjunction is literally happening a few degrees off of it. Anyways, I really think that we're going to see some kind of history repeating itself. And I can't help but think that this may come in the form of oppressive circumstances at first. Also censorship, 3rd house, because it is the 3rd house for the US, which is speech, communication, the mind, entrepreneurs, small businesses, etc., and limiting freedom of speech, or at least ending these issues on a more positive scale. Things I think get really real. We could see major legal issues arising out of a situation to do with speech, censorship, or media, freedom of expression, social change, environmental issues, etc. This may not happen the exact day. None of this may happen the exact day that Saturn moves in, but you know, Saturn can delay effects for certain things. But within the next few months, I would say, I'm pretty positive we will see things like this building. Definitely reality check type of energy here. Education, because the 3rd and 9th is education, so that's going to be affected as well. Major new eras in education. It's going to be pretty revolutionary, I think. We are going to be expanding our intellectual capacity and our society, but in a responsible way, and expanding ourselves virtually in some way. So yeah, I think all in all, this great conjunction is really going to be about finding growth and opportunity, and being innovative with what we have and possibly going beyond limits. Finding our place in the greater whole and coming together as a society eventually. Jupiter is going to be out of fall, which will give us more optimism and more fresh air, I think. I think we're going to discover a lot about our mind and possibly other forms of consciousness and intelligence. That's definitely for sure. But yeah, we're definitely ending a whole new paradigm and we're definitely ending a paradigm and starting a whole new one. We're ending an era and starting a new one. We're shifting from this power and control, who's at the top kind of energy and hierarchy to, you know, the bottom and the people, you know. And so, but I think at first it's going to be kind of a dramatic shift for people with that square to Uranus, and people may fight it. They may fight having more freedom. Like they may want to still depend on those in power because that's what they're used to, and it could be scary. So that's kind of what I'm seeing. I also think that rules and boundaries and laws and all of these, I think the states are going to have more freedom and independence to do what they want, and I think the federal government is either going to become less important or kind of just fade altogether in some way. It's kind of what I'm getting from a lot of this stuff that's coming up. So hopefully this ends up resonating. Before you go on though, if you've made it this far, comment down below. Tell me what you're thinking so far with this video. If you can see a lot of this stuff happening, if it sounds crazy to you, or if you can see any other things happening from a lot of the themes and predictions that I've said already, or the different possibilities that we could see to do with these different archetypes of these planets and placements and all of that. So I would really love to hear your thoughts and feedback on this as well, because it's so damn interesting.